For thousands of years, geography had one unbreakable rule. When the water runs out, you pack up and leave. Because the desert always wins. But in Earth's most landlocked terrain, China is violently rewriting that rule. They are pumping the ocean directly into a dead dust bowl. Conventional blueprints called this crazy, warning it would poison the soil with toxic salt. Yet today, from space, the desert is turning green, and locals are harvesting fresh seafood in the sand. How did they beat the laws of chemistry? Hit subscribe, and let's dive into how a superpower completely broke geography. To understand why anyone would attempt something this absurd, you have to look at a brutal reality. China was running out of time. The world's second-largest economy has a massive geographic glitch. The North holds over a third of the population, the heavy industries, and the massive agricultural belts that feed the nation. But it holds less than 10% of the country's fresh water. For decades, the North survived on a dangerous secret. They drilled thousands of feet down, draining ancient underground aquifers that took millennia to accumulate. By the early 2000s, the bill came due, and it was terrifying. Because they pumped out so much water, the ground under major northern cities was physically sinking. Entire rivers dried into dust. Worse, the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts were expanding by thousands of square kilometers every year, swallowing villages and sending massive dust storms straight toward Beijing. The government's immediate fix was the South-North Water Transfer Project, a staggering $70 billion engineering mega-network stretching over 4,000 kilometers just to drag fresh water from the wet south to the choking north. It kept the region alive, but it was a temporary band-aid on a bullet wound. As global climate patterns shifted and mountain glaciers retreated, engineers realized a scary truth. Dragging fresh water from one dying river to save another is just moving the scarcity around. That is exactly when a radical faction of researchers asked a dangerous question. Why are we fighting over a tiny fraction of fresh water when 97% of the planet's water is sitting right there in the ocean? Pumping the water inland isn't the hard part. Any heavy-duty pump station can push liquid uphill. The real nightmare is the physics of desalination at scale. Traditional desalination plants are absolute energy monsters. They require massive amounts of electricity to force seawater through microscopic membranes under extreme pressure. If you used that old tech to supply a desert, the electricity bills alone would bankrupt a small country. Plus, you're left with brine, a thick, toxic, hyper-salty sludge that kills ecosystems. But a research team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences just flipped the script. They engineered a radical three-dimensional photothermal material that acts like a nanoforest, absorbing an incredible 90.2% of natural sunlight and converting it directly into raw heat. Instead of hogging grid power, this material uses the brutal, ambient heat of the desert sun to drive natural, hyper-efficient evaporation. In year-long outdoor testing, the system ran with zero utility energy costs, slashing the energy required to evaporate seawater by over 45%. Suddenly, turning ocean water into fresh water became cheaper than buying commercial bottled water. But that leaves one massive roadblock. What do you do with the left-behind salt? Dump it back in the ocean, and you suffocate marine life. Leave it in the sand, and the wind blows toxic salt dust over thousands of miles of vital farmland. The engineers needed a massive pattern interrupt. They couldn't just dump the water. They had to build a completely artificial ecosystem. This brings us straight to the northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert, one of the most landlocked, bone-dry places on Earth. Instead of trying to instantly force every single drop of seawater into pure drinking water, scientists pulled a brilliant judo move on nature. They realized that the naturally salty groundwater deep beneath the desert, when mixed with the diverted water, perfectly replicated the chemical composition of the ocean. By deploying industrial-scale solar evaporators, they built massive regulated saltwater lakes right in the middle of the sand dunes. The results caught global agricultural experts completely off guard. Today, these landlocked desert basins aren't just puddles. They are thriving commercial aquaculture hubs. They are successfully farming seafood like tiger prawns, abalone, and grouper. And get this, because these facilities are completely isolated from global shipping lanes, the water is entirely free from industrial microplastics and heavy coastal pollution. It gets better. The water that evaporates naturally from these massive seafood basins rises into the sky, creating localized humidity. This newly formed moisture feeds a massive 3,000-kilometer green belt of salt-tolerant vegetation planted right along the desert highways. The deep root systems of these plants lock the shifting dunes firmly in place, permanently halting the desert's advance. When projects of this magnitude hit the headlines, it's easy to roll your eyes. It sounds like flashy, state-sponsored sci-fi branding, but infrastructure on this scale leaves receipts that are impossible to hide. Look at the satellite data. There are clear, unmistakable bands of vibrant green slicing straight into desert zones that were completely dead just a decade ago. According to local logs, the yield from these desert aquaculture hubs has quietly cleared thousands of metric tons. It is physically restructuring local economies, dropping local seafood prices by 15 to 20%, and cutting down reliance on heavily exploited coastal fisheries. But engineering on a planetary level always comes with an invisible catch. This is not a flawless victory. Geologists have raised serious red flags about the long-term structural integrity of the desert floor. Think about the physics of it. If one of these high-pressure pipeline networks breaches, or if a highly concentrated saline basin springs a leak, that heavy salt water sinks straight down. It penetrates the sand and seeps directly into the deep, fresh groundwater tables below. If that happens, it's game over. The region's remaining fresh water supply is permanently poisoned. On top of that, fighting the desert is an expensive, never-ending war. Shifting dunes don't sit still. They are constantly trying to bury, crush, and corrode thousands of kilometers of high-tech piping and automated sensors. Salt is brutal on metal, and sand is brutal on machinery. Keeping these closed systems operational requires a continuous, massive stream of state capital and manual maintenance. It is a terrifying financial burden, and let's be honest, it's a gamble that only a handful of nations on Earth could actually afford to survive. So, is the payoff worth the catastrophic risk? What China has proven is that geography is no longer a permanent sentence. We now possess the technology to mechanically manipulate planetary water cycles, forcing the coast into the interior and turning barren dust into high-yield, productive infrastructure. But it forces us to look at a much deeper question. Just because we have the power to violently alter the face of the Earth to suit our needs, does it mean we should? If we solve our regional resources crises by building massive artificial loops across continents, what happens when those highly complex closed systems inevitably face a mechanical failure or an unpredicted environmental backfire? I want to hear from you in the comments below. If we can turn the world's deadest deserts into functioning seafood hubs and artificial greenbelts, are we finally fixing our past mistakes? Or are we just running up a massive ecological debt that future generations will have to pay off? Drop your thoughts down there, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next story.